Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to the first Friedman School speaker presentation this year. That we are very fortunate that our first seminar is going to be the Gershoff Memorial Seminar, and it is going to be given by Dr. Christopher Gardner. For those of you who did not know Stanley Gershoff, he really was a champion. He was the founding dean of the school, and he was really a champion of interdisciplinary approaches to looking at food and nutrition, and I think our speaker really epitomizes that. In terms of Dr. Gardner himself, it's a pleasure for me to introduce him. He's the Farquhar Professor of Medicine at Stanford University, and for many, many years he's conducted some really groundbreaking research that has assessed the effect of food and diet on biomarkers of health outcomes and how to motivate individuals to really achieve healthy behaviors, and he's continuing to do that. His investigational approach is something that I sort of consider as where the rubber meets the road, that doesn't tend to be on a theoretical level, but it really is on a practical level, which is something that at times we may underestimate the importance of that. He's conducted many, many studies that have had a major impact on policy, and also some of the current trends that have occurred. So things like garlic and omega-3 fatty acids, soy protein and isoflavones, antioxidants when they were big, and most recently now the plant-based meat alternatives, and the paleo diet and the keto diet. Among his most cited studies is the A to Z study that was Atkins to Zone, and also the Diet Fit study that had to do with weight loss and diets that were high in fat or were high in carbohydrate, and spoiler alert, there was no significant difference. And his work, he's continuing to expand the realm of what he has been doing. Dr. Gardner also serves on a number of committees for the American Heart Association, the American Diabetes Association, and currently chairs the Nutrition Committee for the American Heart Association. And his current research activities include collaborating with chefs and dining operators on as research partners in efforts to identify strategies for optimizing the intersection of taste, health, environment, sustainability, and social justice. So that's really, again, where the rubber meets the road. Dr. Gardner's work clearly encompasses the broad range of interests that are in the Friedman School, and I think that probably Stan Gershoff is looking down and smiling because it's just what he would like to see. So with that, I am going to give the podium to Dr. Gardner and thank him for trekking all the way out from the West Coast. So, thank you.
Very kind. Thank you very much. Sounds kind of scattered, doesn't it? Like he doesn't really do any one thing. So we'll see. Thanks. I'm so honored to be invited, Alice, and the selection committee. I have never been to Tufts, and I grew up in Hanover, New Hampshire. I've been to Boston a million times, so I was super psyched to get the big tour from Edwin and Anna today. Thank you very much, and looking forward to talking to more of you in just a minute. I'm totally intimidated, actually, after I accepted to say, oh my God, I'm going to go to Tufts. What am I going to talk about? I want to, before I skip them at the end, say thanks to all my staff ahead of time. We have a lot of potlucks, and so everything I'm going to talk about today was supported by so many fabulous staff members. I really am intimidated by Tufts. I'm just drooling right now. So for any of you who don't know this, Stanford has no undergrad nutrition program, no graduate nutrition program, no nothing. So we have a School of Medicine, a Department of Medicine that has 14 divisions, and one of those divisions is the Stanford Prevention Research Center, whose 3 pillars are eating better, exercising more, and smoking less. Half of us are behavioral psychologists, and I'm like the token nutrition person. So I'm not really sure how I get to pull off the things that I do, but I'm going to show you the stuff that I do. And I've had the great honor of interacting quite often with Alice and Dari and Jose, but I was stunned to see that there are 62 faculty in nutrition. Like I'm the only one at Stanford. It's just such a different environment. It's like, I'm so jealous. Okay, so I'm going to get over that, and I'm going to try to say stuff, but you have such a breadth of expertise here. I honestly am a little bit intimidated. I'm going to try to circle back at the end. My talk is very much geared toward grad students, and there are a lot of you here, and I'm so jealous you have so many grad students, okay? But if I had some, maybe I could say this back home, but I don't. Okay, these will be my 3 priorities that I hope I get back to. I'm going to start out kind of with one of my title openers here. Is your career going to be exhilarating or boring or terrifying? And part of the boring part, I sort of remember this old Italian guy that was doing research near me. And I started my postdoc at Stanford, and he said, oh, congratulations, you got your PhD in nutrition. Too bad we know everything right now. It's like too late to get this. I said, really? And part of that is true. Like for years, we've known a lot of basic stuff, the DRIs. You know, we've got proteins, carbs, fats, minerals, vitamins. I've been teaching human nutrition at Stanford for 20 years. There's the same number of amino acids as when I started a long time ago. It really didn't change. And here's some dietary guidelines for Americans from which year? This is 1980, and most of it is still carried forward in 2020. And yes, yes, we shifted the dietary patterns, and that's fantastic. But if you really look at the architecture of the original pyramid, the mypyramid.gov, the my plate, it's pretty much the same as it was in 1980. So I don't know if that's boring, but you know, we went through this thing where the whole nutrition world changed their mind from low fat to low carb. So here's this brilliant trajectory of data from 2000 to 2016 with p-values of 0.001. Now, if this was the general public, they would say, so 0.001 means nothing, right? Because those lines are flat. But you all know, no, there's thousands of people there. So that tiny little dip at the end is a statistically significant trend. But it's not, is it? It's flat. Come on. It's not different. Ugh. Okay, so replication is really important, so we have to do that. Null findings are really important. We have to do that. But at the end of the day, it's almost like this dang guy captured it in 7 words. Like, I have a PhD. What should I do? Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Then there's the terrifying side. Right? So the terrifying side for me is going back to that same paper and knowing that instead of just the macronutrients, they show the subtypes. And if you look across this, you're going to see 10% high-quality carbs, 5 or 10% protein, animal or plant, 10% almost equal for saturated mono and poly, and freaking, what happened? I went one too far. Freaking 40% for the low-quality carbs. Isn't this terrifying? And it's getting better? Not really, just a little. Okay, that's terrifying. It's a little terrifying that with all this work we do, we get all this money, we do all this research. Here's the HEI, it's hardly budged in all these years. Is this glass half full or half empty? So, you know, it's more than halfway up, but I don't know if anybody can tell me, if you just ate enough food to survive, wouldn't you get a score of 40? Like if you just ate sugar and ice cream, I think you'd still end up at 40. So it's not like 0 is the bottom here. So 59, oh my God, there's a lot of room for improvement. I found these old data from USDA about fruit and vegetable consumption. I'm even going to point to this one right here. Here's all the colors. The highest level of adherence is 35 to 45%. The highest level, and most of the states aren't that color. And it didn't change for the decade that they looked at this. None of the states ever met the guidelines. Okay, and then this is super terrifying. Okay, now I have a really funny one that I pulled up while I was making these slides. So how many of you watched this movie? Okay, now the funny thing that happened when I pulled up this slide, I swear to God, I did not make this up. In the year 2022, holy shit, that's this year. When they made this movie, They made it for 2022. And there's a company that now makes Soylent. And they want to sell it. Punchline, if you haven't seen this movie, in the apocalyptic future, there's no food. And so they grind up dead people and serve it as food. Sorry if you didn't see the movie and I just spoiled it. So that's the point of the movie. That's like terrifying. And they named the damn product Soylent. I don't get it. I don't know how, I guess only young people buy it who haven't seen the movie. And I know that Paleolithic man did not eat keto brownies. There's just no way they ate keto brownies. So it's even a little terrifying that the Eat Lancet report came out and did this beautiful thing of showing 6 planetary boundaries, not just climate change, but land, water, biodiversity, eutrophication. And they said, of the 6, we're in the red zone already for 3, and if we project out to 2050 with business as usual, 5 of the 6 will be in the dead zone. And really what we're going to have to do is produce more food and cut back on our waste and shift our diet. And if we do 1 or 2 of those things, it's not enough. We have to do all 3 things, and we can't even get people to eat more vegetables and fruits. How the hell are we going to get more production, less waste, and have people change their diet? So to me, there's some terrifying stuff here. But I want to leave you inspired, so I left the exhilarating part till the last. So let's get excited about Eat Lancet, actually. I was super proud to be invited at the last American Heart Association Epi Lifestyle meeting to give one of the opening keynote talks on sustainability, and I had a blast putting those slides together. I'm only going to share one of them. So I didn't go to the medical literature. I went mostly to science and nature. There are a ton of papers out there about the intersection of food and the environment, and they have thousands of citations, and they have outrageous altmetric scores. And it's a whole wealth of information making this connection again and again and again. And in the Lancet, they did that for the Eat Lancet report. So I'm pretty excited of the recognition that connection between food and the environment is getting. And Alice, thank you very much for leading this fantastic team. Larry Apple and Maya oh my God, believe it. Okay, sorry, Maya. I only call her Maya. Did this great paper and updated our guidance from American Heart Association and had this great line. This hasn't really been part of the guidelines before, and this is fantastic that they put in this statement about red meat being at the intersection of lowering that for health and for the environment. Congratulations, Daria, and everybody here for the fantastic report that came out, and it's so excited about the White House conference that's coming up. That's incredible. I know Tufts was one of the sites for NPH, Precision Health. That is pretty exciting, amazing. I get to work with Jose with this fantastic group, the Zoe group, that's been looking at personalized nutrition, which is a really hot topic and not resolved yet. There's a lot more to do at home. I get to work with this incredible pair of microbiologists, Justin and Erica Sonnenberg. The amazing thing is they're married and they work together in the lab all the time, and they are still super cute and super adorable. I love my wife dearly. I could not work with her every day and then come home to her at night. But these two are amazing. He writes the grants, she runs the labs, writes the book. They have this fantastic book, The Good Gut, if you haven't seen it yet. And we've been doing some very fun diet microbiome studies with inflammation markers. There's a guy named Mark Davis at Stanford who got a huge Gates Foundation grant to create a human immune monitoring center. And so we've been trying to create the trifecta between diet modification, microbiome manipulation, and inflammation impact. Okay, so choose your adventure there. Boring, terrifying, exciting. You have all those options as grad students moving forward. And in terms of choosing your own adventure, I had fun writing this title when they asked me months ago. And Alice wrote back and said, home run. And then I said, oh, but what did I really mean when I said that? Okay. So I decided I would share some of my adventure because I think it might inspire some of you to think about how you might look at this next year and 5 years and 10 years out. So I actually started out in upstate New York. as a philosophy major. Okay? And then, what do you do with a philosophy major? You wait tables when you're done. And so I worked in a whole lot of restaurants for 6 years after I graduated. And then at one point, I thought, well, I got to grow up and do something. I had become a vegetarian, mostly because a girl dumped me, and I tried to get her back, and she didn't take me back. But I liked being a vegetarian, so I thought, the restaurant will be vegetarian. But they're going to make fun of my amino acids. I know they're just going to keep asking me that same damn question again about where I get my protein. So maybe I should go get a master's degree so that I would have an articulate answer. So at the time, I was trying to be a hippie and the best hippie I could be and go to Berkeley. And I said, can I please get into the nutrition program? And they looked at my transcript and they said, the only science class you ever took was Psych 101. I said, yeah, that's how I fulfilled my gen ed requirement for science. And they said, you are missing a few classes. And so they made me take 12 missing undergraduate classes before ever applying. And I did, because I didn't have anything else to do at the time. I was just trying to be a wandering bohemian. So I ended up doing that, and I got good enough grades that they said, why don't you skip the master's and get a PhD? And I said, I don't need a PhD to open a restaurant, but maybe I'll put the restaurant aside, and I will try this for a little while. And I actually kind of had an untestable hypothesis. I'm not sure I got very good mentoring, but I was a really good TA, so I thought maybe I would be a teacher. Except no one gave me even an interview when I had a PhD from Berkeley for a teaching position. And I got married in the middle of all that and had a kid, and I really needed money to live off of. And I attended everything I possibly could, and at one point I attended a seminar at Stanford in the division I'm at today, which is almost 30 years later, and they had a postdoc. I said, I don't even know what is a postdoc. They said, you get paid a little more than a grad student, but half as much as faculty. And there's no terminal degree, and you just write papers. And I said, cool, how much teaching is there? They said, none. I said, they're going to find out I'm not very smart, actually. So I better get in and out of this thing as fast as I could. Interestingly, my dissertation was about acculturation, the Hispanic population of San Francisco, and diet, and cardiovascular risk factors. And I know no one read my dissertation because it's super boring and it's not very good, but all those words were very appropriate for the division that I ended up in. So they took me as a postdoc. And at the time of my PhD, I had worked in Ron Krause's lab doing LDL particle size, so I knew how to do gel electrophoresis. And an interesting thing happened is Stanford had this 5-city project. And the 5-city project involved 4 cities, really, where every 2 years they went in and at random got 500 people and collected blood, and did anthropometrics and collected diet data. And they'd been storing the blood in the freezer, and they had 20 years of NIH funding. And they were tracking all the hospitals in the area for incident cases of cardiovascular disease. And they'd done most of the papers they could do, and one of the freezers broke. And the samples started to thaw. And they said, if you want to do something, you better do it now, because the blood is thawing. And so they said, what could you do? And they came up with this nested case control study. So let's find our incident cases of CAD, and we found 125. And they said, now we have 9,870 people to match them to. So if you want to do an expensive thing, you can take the blood for the 125 cases and find 125 matched pairs. What can you do? And I said, I could do gel electrophoresis. And so every week we lined up 4 postdocs, and they took a little pipette and say, here's some blood, here's some blood, here's some blood. And we all ran off in different directions. And I got, it's on here already. I got a JAMA publication out of this. And Ernie Schaefer was in the same issue that week, and Ron Krause was on both of the papers, actually. And we had basically established the independent association of LDL particle size with cardiovascular disease. So it's amazing. I wasn't maybe as stupid as I thought, but really I got a lot of great mentoring. And another funny thing happened at the time, and it's related to Alice and Jose, which was we had a journal club. And it was my turn to find an article for Journal Club. And I was not very prepared, and I found one at the last minute, and I shared it with everyone before reading the paper. And then I read the paper, and they concluded that monos and polys had the same impact on lipids. I said, oh, no, they got this wrong. Scott Grundy said polys are better for HDLs. Everybody knows that. God, leave it to me to pick a fluke paper. Okay, so let me see. I'll get another one, and I'll bring it to Journal Club along with the one assigned. And the other one I got said the same thing. And then I got 2 more papers, and they said the same thing. I got 5 more papers, and they said the same thing. I said, what the hell? Everybody says what Scott Grundy said is true. All these papers say the opposite thing. Wow, that's amazing. And it actually turned into a meta-analysis that I published with the godfather of meta-analysis, Ingram Okun, who was at Stanford. I attended his class, and as part of his class, I wrote a meta-analysis on these papers. And it was very instrumental for me because you guys did a fantastic paper, and some of them were really crappy ones in the meta-analysis. And I learned a ton about the difference in quality in dietary intervention trials by trying to extract the data from these different papers. So that was really an amazing experience for me. But what it taught me was I just had to use a computer. I don't need much money. I could be an observational epidemiologist. So maybe I won't be a teacher. I will be a scientist after all. I'll be an observational epidemiologist. But then I kept getting slammed for association, not causation. Please follow up with a trial. And so I started writing some trials. As I was finishing up my postdoc, I wrote up an NIH R01, and Stanford postdocs aren't allowed to submit them as PI. You have to find somebody else, like an established faculty member. And John Farquhar, was the head of our division, and he agreed to be the PI of this thing and helped me write it. And basically, I knew I'd be leaving, and I knew they'd never fund it, and I was a vegetarian, so I said, I'm just going to write a vegetarian study. And son of a gun, they funded it, actually, and gave us $750,000, which was a lot of money back then. And I got to stick around, and we had 120 people, and we fed them 2 low-fat diets. One was very convenience food-based, and one was full of whole grains and legumes and whole foods and things like that, to which I actually had to add butter, eggs, and cheese to it so that I could match saturated fat, total fat, cholesterol. So the whole hypothesis was, if physicians are just saying, you should try a low-fat diet before I give you a statin, and they weren't getting much progress, they weren't making much of a dent, maybe it's because low-fat was too simple. And maybe if you just did low-fat in a very convenient way, it wasn't lowering it enough to keep you off drugs. So I said, what if the low-fat was fiber and garlic and soy and all the other things I can think of in a whole food diet? We had these chemically analyzed, and we fed all the 120 participants for a month on the 2 diets. And sure enough, we actually doubled the LDL cholesterol lowering when we did what we called low-fat plus compared to low-fat typical or convenient. And so we concluded, yes, if you're a physician, and it was very interesting, right at the time, Alice, AHA had sort of shifted more toward foods. And so I sort of manipulated that and said, so no one's ever tested the new thing that AHA said, so it turns out we tested it. Well, it wasn't really quite that convenient. But we said that. I was super happy that we got this statistically significant finding. For all of our studies, we have a big dinner presentation at the end, and we told everybody what happened. And I said, we're all done. Go forth and eat well. And they said, are you going to keep feeding us? I said, no, that cost a lot of money. Go eat. And they said, sorry, we don't cook much, and we don't shop much. Thanks for letting us join, but we're probably not going to do it. Really? After all that time? Okay, and then one of the things that might have worked was garlic, and I live really close to the garlic capital of the world. And so we designed and got funded an R01 for real garlic in Gilroy, California, and 2 types of supplements. And in an elaborate study with about 200 people, we gave them a sandwich a day for 6 months. And some of the condiments had garlic, and some did not. And some got active pills, and some got placebo pills. And I could spend a whole hour on this, but you don't want to hear this. What you want to hear is after 4 years of my life, $1.4 million, turned out the placebo lowered the LDL cholesterol more than all 3 active arms. Publish your null findings, they're important. To this day, those pills still say lowers cholesterol on the pills. That's a little terrifying after I spent all this money. But we did a big presentation and we said, thank you everybody again for doing this. Thanks for moving science forward. Null findings are important. Thanks for coming tonight. See you later. And 3 guys hung out afterwards and they said, thanks, everybody's gone now. Can you tell us where you got those pills? And I said, I can, but why? And they said, we would like to get them. I said, I just spent 4 years of my life and an hour telling you that they don't work. Yeah, we think they work for us. No, really, please? Oh my God. So really, all I wanted was a vegetarian restaurant. And instead, I got a faculty position and NIH funding, and I got published in JAMA. And I found something that worked, and they're not going to do it. And I found something that didn't work, and they're going to do it anyway. I am feeling useless at this point, right? Oh my God. Okay, so I did become a human nutrition interventionist, and I called myself a feeder and a bleeder at the time for all the diet interventions I did, but I was ineffective. So right about that time, a colleague said, we should apply for this new research thing that the NIH has put out there. They want to see if they can prevent weight gain in young adults. This is the demographic that's gaining weight the fastest, and we suck at helping people lose weight, so let's prevent them from gaining weight. And so we put together this thing called social responsibility and engagement, and we didn't get funded. A whole bunch of digital people got funded, and by the way, it didn't work. 10 years later, they looked at all the people that got funded, and it didn't really work. But we didn't get funded, and we had this thing written up, and we thought we would recycle it. And Tom's a year younger than me, but he's much smarter than me, and he said, you know, we should have had pilot data. And I said, I know you should always have pilot data, but that's a catch-22. You have to have money to have pilot data to apply so you can get money. It's super hard. Where would we get pilot data? And he said, you moron, we are on a campus with young adults. We should have a class, and we should collect data from the class. I said, oh, that sounds kind of cool. How long? I've never started a new class. I teach human nutrition, but I inherited it from someone. How long would that take? A month. So we proposed food and society. And in food and society, we didn't have any scientific stuff. We read popular books, and we assigned documentaries. And we didn't have quizzes, exams, or anything. Tom is very pedagogically astute. We had them write op-eds and try to publish them. We had them blog. We had them create YouTubes for their peers. And we never mentioned health. This was a rule we had in the class. Never say health. Only say animal rights and welfare, or talk about the connection between food and the environment, or talk about human labor abuse issues in slaughterhouses and farm workers, or talk about subsidy programs for growing monocultured crops, or talk about the USDA and the conflict of interest of designing the DGAs and representing all those folks. And at the end of the day, we actually published a paper in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine saying that in our class, compared to 2 of our colleagues' classes where they used the same survey and they were health classes but not ours, our students reported eating better. And we never said health. We only said these other things. And it's science, so we had data. So look at this. We have things that are statistically significant. We have asterisks. We have an aggregate composite score. And it is statistically significant. It is a horrible study. They self-selected in our class. We don't really know if they ate that. We don't know if they ate it months later. Why did they publish it? We admitted all those limitations in the paper. And we said, nothing is working right now. We are reporting this because we're trying something different. So we want you to take this as a concept paper, and they took it. It was career changing for me because at the end of that first year of class, I said, we're thinking of doing this again. It was so empowering. Tell us what maybe were your favorite points and not, and maybe we'll do that next year. And the first woman said, "Oh my God, the whole vegetarian thing and the animals and the way they treat them," and tears in her eyes. "I went vegetarian during the study." And the next kid said, "Well, I really like the climate thing. I grew up on a ranch and we don't treat our animals poorly. We treat them really well, but I was stunned by that, so now I only buy grass-fed, regenerative farming stuff." And the next person was a Republican and said, "Climate change is a hoax. I'm sorry, that doesn't work. That I'm very fiscally responsible." And I read the part about the 13 Wendy's that got opened up in Harlem, and 10 went out of business, and they all got small business loans, and Wendy's didn't pay a dime. The franchise owners lost their shirts, and the business loans didn't get repaid. I don't go to fast food anymore. I thought, oh my God, this is fascinating. I've been getting these NIH dollars. I'm having no impact. You went vegetarian. You're only eating grass-fed, and you stopped eating fast food. This is amazing, and there wasn't any one topic that resonated with everyone. The key was there's sort of a pocketful of topics that if collectively I had access to, I could get more folks engaged. So I really think the omnivore's dilemma is kind of about this unprecedented number of food choices. How would you choose? And with my PhD, I had been doing this. I could give an hour lecture on any of these, and I started giving lectures on a different set of topics, and they were changes. The changes they were making were entirely consistent with what I had wanted them to do, but for a different reason. And so for me, this was stealth nutrition. Whoops, I thought, oh wait, it's funny, I have a stupid thing up here that I have to get rid of. There. It wasn't advancing. Okay, it's still not advancing. Now it's advancing. So they're eating the way I wanted to, even though I didn't mention health. So I felt like the bottom line here was that these external motivators for at least our young adults in Stanford were more motivating than my boring lectures about health and milligrams of antioxidants. But they were making the changes that I was hoping they would make that were helpful. So it was really empowering, and at about that same time, I learned that there was a high school locally that had been downsized to a middle school, and that the soccer, softball, and football field were not utilized. The land was lying fallow, and they decided to put an 11-acre organic farm on the grounds of the middle school. And there's a longer story to this, but I got Stanford undergrads to be hired as summer research assistants and camp counselors, and we started farm camp. And we get 125 kids a year to come to this. So we just had our 11th year of farm camp. It's a collaboration with the school district and Stanford. And these kids come, and they play in the vegetables, and they chase the chickens, and they dig in the dirt. And we make lunch. We cook lunch. And we have stoves and pots and flames and sharp knives. And they flavor them with herbs, and they say, "My mom doesn't let me cook. My dad doesn't let me cook, but you guys let me play with fire and hot pots and things like that." And just recently, one of the counselors who's now a med student at UW published a paper on farm camp and the interaction of the kids and how that was related to their engagement with vegetables. So that's been really fun, sort of out of the box for me. I've also accepted a position as scientific advisor for the CIA. That might surprise you, but I did turn down the FBI and the NRA. And this is a joke that I totally stole from our vice provost of residential and dining services. This is totally her joke. This is not mine, but I think it's hilarious. And I started hanging out with the CIA and learned of Greg Drescher's concept of unapologetic deliciousness. And so for me, this really resonated, that as a public health professional, I've been apologizing for a really long time about, yes, I want you to lower your cholesterol, and I have some fiber that'll do it. It's in cardboard. I'm sorry you have to eat this. And my face would scrunch up. And Greg said, no, don't apologize. Make it unapologetically delicious. Work with chefs. And so they started this thing called the Menus of Change, which was basically the CIA and Harvard for the most part. And they have very cool graphics about this being the intersection of nutrition, environmental sustainability, social justice, and deliciousness. And that if they put all those together and worked with different pairs of folks, that this intersection would be the menus of change, and they would get the food industry to show up and talk about it. They made 24 principles of the menus of the change. The ones on the right are nutritional. The ones on the left are operational. So if you have an institutional food setting where you're trying to make money, you'd use the ones on the left. That got spun off into the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative. There's now 69 different universities that have agreed to use their dining halls as living laboratories to do experiments. And Tufts is one of those, by the way. And so just as a quick example of what we can do with that kind of thing, with some of those principles, a psych professor at Stanford got her PhD student to go into Stanford Dining Hall at first. We served 17 different vegetables over the course of a 10-week academic quarter, multiple times, as you cycle through, and they came up with a naming convention for them, working with a linguist. So this is a psych professor and a linguistics professor, working with a PhD student, and everything got a basic name, a health-promoting name, and an indulgent name, okay, as we cycled through this whole thing. And the trick to it was, no matter what we named it, the recipe didn't change. It was only the signage that we changed. Okay, to make this very quick, this is probably obvious, but twisted citrus glazed carrots got taken more often than carrots. Okay, but here's where my PhD efforts are destroyed. Compared to just saying carrots, high fiber or low sodium carrots were taken less. Isn't that added value? They took less. It's like they expected healthy carrots to taste worse. Oh my God. Okay, so other principles had to do with eat less red meat less often. They had a concept called the protein flip, which is pretty clever, where they said, oh, you know that big piece of meat in the center of the plate? You don't need to get rid of it. Make a farro bowl or a taco or a salad or a pasta dish with 2 ounces of meat, not 6, 10, or 12. And so the protein flip was like, put plants at the middle of the plate and have the meat be the condiment or the side dish or a small portion. And that was super fun for me. They said, oh, you're our token nutritionist for now for this kind of protein thing. Can you do a little protein 101 for us? And I did, and they said, really? People are getting enough protein? And they can get all the protein they need from more vegetables? I said, yep, well, mostly legumes. So anyway, I had a great fun writing a whole thing about the intersection of protein in the US and the environment. So I encourage you to read that. I'm super proud of this paper in Nutrition Reviews. And then we got asked to write about sustainability for current atherosclerosis reports, and I got 4 postdocs on it, and they did a fantastic job. And then I started a new class at Stanford called Healthy and Sustainable Food Systems, and my new gig is institutional food. I'm not making much of a dent on people's food choices one at a time, but if chefs make it unapologetically delicious in an institutional setting and order many pallets at a time, I think you could get a farmer to change what they're growing, right? And so if someone will buy it, they will grow it. They just want to make it an honest living. Pay them what it's worth for their time to grow stuff. Maybe institutional food. So I have a speaker from all those institutions on my list come into class telling the students how they have revamped what they order along all the lines that I'm talking about. And many of them have chefs in them. I don't know why this is dinging. Okay, there's my sign that I should go fast so I can finish up. And then I actually, as part of the American Heart Association, got asked to be the co-chair of a paper on nutrition security, which is way out of the box for me. And I kind of think I'm not so much a human nutrition interventionist. I'm kind of a food systems wannabe. I have a PhD, so I'm allowed to do stuff, right? I'm Dr. Gardner, and so I really have no training in this, but I've been dabbling in it, and I've been having a blast. So here I am trying to talk to you guys, and you do so much, so I'm very intimidated. Like, you already do all this, but for me, a lot of this was new, bouncing from one place to the other. And I want to tell you where I ended up with my last set of slides here. This is so funny, it keeps sticking. And it's going to relate to my last few points. So I'm going to go pretty fast through this last part so you can ask some questions. I'm really existentially concerned about the lack of consensus that the public sees in nutrition. And I'm really interested in the term equipoise in nutrition studies that we do, that we set up a straw man diet to knock over, that we just compare it to nothing, the control group, and that's not saying much. And I'm actually writing a book right now, I'm almost done with it, called It Depends. And it depends instead of what and with what. I think if we did that, we would answer a lot of questions. And so I won't have time to go into these in detail, but we just finished a ketogenic versus Mediterranean diet study that got published in AJCN. Actually came out electronically a couple of months ago, but the hard copy just came out 2 weeks ago. And the whole central hypothesis here was, both keto and Mediterranean could say, no added sugar, no refined grain. Keto goes beyond that and says no beans or grains or fruits. Isn't that insane? Would there really be any added benefit? And so we made what I think, from purpose of equipoise, we made a good keto diet, a well-formulated ketogenic diet, versus Mediterranean without the sugar and grains. And we put them head-to-head in a crossover study with a time point 12 weeks afterward to see what they were eating after they tried both of those diets. And our conclusion was that there was not enough additional benefit. People who couldn't stick with keto, they were eating less fiber, they were getting fewer nutrients because of the restriction. But I was really focused on this equipoise. I was really trying to make a good keto diet and a good Mediterranean diet. And then we did, swap meat was our name. I hope you appreciate our acronym here. We had a lot of fun making that up. So if you're going to eat processed food for these alternative meats, how are you going to respond to this kind of full-page New York Times ad? Yeah, in fact, it does have saturated fats. It has coconut oil. Yes, it does have some sodium in it. I'm going to skip through this really quickly. All I'm going to say is we used Beyond Meat, and what would you compare it to? Red meat from McDonald's, red meat from something else. We actually went to Good Eggs in San Francisco, which only gets organic farm, regenerative farming, pasture raised. And we got 3 benefits to the Beyond Meat over the red meat. The money was from Beyond Meat, so feel free later to question me about my bias on this study. I'm going to skip through that. And we had a very cool microbiome finding that I'm going to have to skip through. We also did what I think is the biggest, most impactful study that I ever worked on. Was a huge 600-person, 1-year weight loss study of low carb versus low fat. We made it a very healthy low fat and very healthy low carb. And we did not replicate some of the previous findings. And some of the proponents of low carb complained to me and said, you did the study wrong. Really? What did I do? He said, you made it a healthy low fat. I said, that's wrong? They said, yeah, Americans don't eat like that when they eat low fat. They eat added sugar and refined grain. And I said, I know, but that's not equipoise. That's not fair. So we really didn't see too many differences. We did get an odd write-up in the New York Times that we had studied quality, not quantity, which we didn't. That actually was not the hypothesis. So we have to deal with the media. Okay, I want you guys to have time to ask questions, so I'm going to skip this, but I'll share the slides about a foundational diet. Michael Pollan, there's Tufts. These will be sort of my closing notice. I don't have Tufts, so I have to go outside to the divisions all around Stanford to work with people in completely different disciplines, including a farmer on campus and the cooks in the dining hall. And that has been really powerful for me. And Stanford has a new school of sustainability that somebody just donated $1 billion to. It opened September 1st. And so I'm really interested in moving my career that way. So 3 of my priorities for you graduate students is, I think we need to show more about consensus than controversy. And so be really thoughtful about the way you're reporting this. I find when I talk through stuff with my colleagues, we almost always agree. Why does the public think we disagree so much? And we have to get back to healthy food tastes good. That is it. The public doesn't think so. That's horrible. And thank God the White House conference is coming up, because fascinating shift from food security to nutrition security lately. USDA has picked up on that. AHA has picked up on that. That's really great. So my journey that I shared with you was going from philosophy major through all those different things. But my latest journey is to be the Gershoff lecturer, which is the highlight of my career, and my hair is now grayer. Thank you very much, and I'll take some questions.
Thank you very much. And something tells me that you are going to go on, and there's going to be another highlight in your career. But thank you. I was right about the home run. So I'd like to thank Dr. Gardner for giving the talk, and I'd also like to thank Adam Massif and Edwin. Sorry, I did not put my glasses on here. Edwin Ortega, who are the two Gershoff scholars that really did an outstanding job putting this together, working with Dr. Gardner to make this true success, and I really appreciate everything that you guys did. With that, I'm going to open the floor up to questions, and one of the things we're going to be asking you to do is to speak into the microphone, because this is being recorded, and we want to make sure that we pick up the questions and that those people that are listening virtually will also be able to hear you. We have microphones we can pass around.
I should have planted some. Damn it.
Well, these guys know that, Anna and Edwin know that they're going to be on if need be.
So do you see differences when you feed the same diet to men versus women? And is that a concern in terms of your feeding studies?
I still get this. So we are almost never powered to look at men and women separately. So it's a fantastic question, but doing that often doubles the size of everything we do, and we can almost never get funded for that, right? So if this is our main effect, and we want to see if there's an interaction by gender, rarely. And I often don't have a strong case to make, like for our new microbiome studies. I don't know enough about the microbiome to know that there would be a gender difference. I will say that Lucia Aronica, who's a postdoc, actually went back to our Diet Fit study and found a fascinating interaction between men and women. So we were trying to get 50-50, and we had about 57% women and 43% men. And she came up with this somewhat tortured explanation that there were small differences between men and women, and the one that seemed to stick out was somewhat cultural. The women assigned to low carb did not adhere very well. They had a hard time eating fat. And so she kind of explored this from sort of a sociocultural perspective. Did they just not adhere because they didn't like it? No, she found a little evidence to support plausibly that there's just so many cultural norms about not being fat that they had a hard time being low carb. The men didn't care. The men actually did a little better on low carb if you split it up. So there are gender differences. They're just often hard to pick up for me in my studies.
Now that you have preliminary data, maybe with this push on sex as a biological variable, you'll be able to...
And we always have to address that in our grants now.
Yeah.
So good postdoc projects or PhD students.
Questions?
Another?
Hi, thank you so much for your defense of the humble carrot in the dining hall. Right here.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi, thank you.
I'm just curious, especially in the keto and Mediterranean survey, if you controlled it all for fitness or wellness routines and how that came up.
So we didn't control for it because everybody was their own control. It's a crossover. But we did have that difference. So in all these studies, we can go back and stratify and look at that. So that's what postdocs are for. You finish the main study and you go back at that. Are you thinking that there's a fitness component difference or another important mediator?
Well, I'm thinking if someone was more likely to maintain the keto diet, for example, they would probably be in the fitness industry. I work in that field, and there's a really big crossover between folks who do fitness and who are more likely to adapt things like ketogenic diets.
So we actually wrote an entire paper on adherence before we published the main finding. And let me just share a couple things because I think this is so very cool. So the design, which I had to go through too quickly, was for 4 weeks we delivered food to them so that they would be instantly adherent. And then for 8 weeks, they were on their own. And so we did diet assessment at both time points. And so after 4 weeks, the average of a 10-point score, 10 being perfect, was 7.5 for both groups. Interestingly, for some of the keto folks, when we delivered food, Their score was 3. It's like, we delivered it. So one is, that sucks. Another one is, thank you for being so honest to say you're in a study and you're willing to report that you didn't eat what we mailed you. But this is really important to know that. So that's one quickie, but I'm going to tell you, when they were eating on their own, a fascinating thing happened. Both groups dropped from a score of about 7.5 to about 5.5 on our adherence score. And the Mediterranean diet was all clustered around the 5.5, so like, I don't know, 3.5 to 8. The keto group was from 0 to 10. They actually had some people being more adherent on their own than the Mediterranean group, and some people at 0. So it was fascinating that the variance was much like, for some people, it clicked, and for some, they couldn't do it at all. And when you looked at the adherence, if you took the top 10% of keto adherers 12 weeks later, they bombed. There were only 2 people at the end of the study 12 weeks later who were following anything close to a keto diet. So this is 40 people, or 36 who finished the whole thing. Our experiences was they couldn't sustain it. Mm-hmm. Now, these weren't athletes, though.
So I have a question. If you could focus on anything at this point in terms of improving diet quality, that data you showed at the beginning, that our diet quality is not great and that it's been very consistent over the past 20 years, what do you think, what would you go after?
Fiber. In one word. And the hook I would use is the microbiome. I have all these people showing up pooping for me. It's amazing. I open up and I say, the study involves poop. I need your shit, and I need it multiple times. And it's gross, and you gotta get it, and you gotta mail it to us, and so if you don't wanna do it, I understand. Son of a bitch, they all show up, and they poop. And they send us their poop. And I honestly, I tell them, I'm not sure what I can tell you. I'm going to give this to Justin Sonnenberg, and he's going to run 60 nests, and he's going to do shotgun metagenomics, and he's going to do all this other stuff. And we're still not quite sure exactly what to tell you about your microbiome. They all want to know. It's a hot topic. And so for me, this idea of focusing on fiber, which is boring, your eyes could glaze over, but again, finding that other hook. And so fiber is a simple thing to count. Right? So in terms of tracking, you might not have to do the whole food frequency or the whole diet recall. If I had to do anything else, I'd do maybe fiber over sugar ratio, like minimize your sugar, maximize your fiber. I don't think you can go wrong doing those two, but I need the sexy thing like the microbiome. Or maybe I can talk about environmental sustainability, how this would be linked to that as well.
That's what I was wondering. How is it going to resonate, that microbiome? People have heard it, it's sort of the hot word these days, but I'm not sure there's much of an understanding about it. So what's the hook that would get people to reverse the way they're eating now?
And so the key is the different hook. So in our food and society class, actually, one kid was from Florida. And he did his whole op-ed on the sugar industry wiping out the Everglades. And the runoff from the sugar production was decimating the Everglades. And he was horrifically upset. No one else in the class had ever heard of it. And so just bringing that to the fore and writing it up as I'm environmentally outraged, and so I'm going to cut back on my sugar. That didn't work for the next person, but for the next person, maybe the fiber and the microbiome worked. So it's having these different tools in your tool chest and learning how to me, that's personalized nutrition. Not so much personalizing the genome or the microbiome, personalizing the message and how you engage people is where I'd like to go next.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much. It was really fun to be able to listen to a lecture and laugh and learn the whole time. So I appreciate that sense of humor. Actually, this is a follow-up to what you were just talking about, but I apologize. I didn't see when your health and society, class was. And I was curious what generation the students were in.
Okay.
Just knowing that millennials tend to have a sense of a greater sense of societal responsibility. And then Gen Z typically is known for more of like a sustainability focus, recognizing the impacts of climate change. So curious if you've noticed generational effects and what we should do about that.
So 2010 is when we started, and I still teach it today. The funniest thing the most interesting thing I've seen is the more recent classes won't let me get away from social justice.
Yeah.
That didn't come up 10 years ago. It was much more about the environment. And then we had a fascinating thing this year about cultural appropriation. I said, what? And I tried to steer away, and they came back to it. They said, the dining halls have been making some banh mi sandwiches and some other things, and they are not. Those are not culturally appropriate, and they're like stealing it. I'm like, oh, but they're really trying. They're trying to be diverse, and they were really upset with the cultural appropriation of some very specific geographic cultural diets. And so I wasn't prepared for that, and I had to come back to it because it came up again and again. So social justice and cultural appropriation, so I'm learning.
Thank you.
There's one there, and there. You.
So thank you for the wonderfully inspiring talk and telling us your story. So you have become a food systems wannabe, and in some ways a successful food systems wannabe, but it seems like there are other parts of the food system that will be necessary for you to really target and crack if there are going to be broad changes. So have any plans for that?
Yeah, just continuing to reach out, actually. So my personal plans are, we had a donor contribute $2.5 million to start a plant-based diet initiative, and part of what we use for that is a pilot study on campus. And so we've had 3 pilot feasibility offerings to campus, and the 3rd one is out right now. And so it's attracting faculty who are applying for their grad students for money. And what I'm realizing is, so for those of you who wouldn't know, and why would you, Stanford has business, law, education, earth science, engineering, medicine, and humanities and sciences. And I'm stunned sometimes that somebody 3 buildings down is doing something related to my work that I never heard of because of all the silos we have in academia. And so this way of reaching out, offering pilot feasibility funds, is ways for me to meet new people that are doing these things that I didn't recognize before. So I guess that's my plan, is just for convenience sake, who else is nearby that I could work with in another area?
Last question.
No pressure.
Can we pass it down?
Please make it a softball.
Yeah, no pressure now. So I thought it was really interesting how your class was so influenced by the readings and the documentaries. And I'm just wondering if you've applied that into your research, teaching, as like a method for behavior change or adherence to diets and things like that, because it seemed like it was a really powerful effect for the students and how it can be applied to the broader public for health purposes.
I haven't written an NIH R01 on that at all. Like, I don't know how to write that. Farm Camp is all about that. So what I love is unleashing. So Stanford has a great undergraduate summer internship for human biology majors, and you get $7,000 for the summer. And they're supposed to go be camp counselors and find a barrier that they can identify for the kids for the vegetables and try to write up and do a poster presentation. So I'm learning from them as they come up with these ideas. And they're encouraged to go talk to the linguist, the psych professor, the somebody else. Like, I actually don't do much qualitative research. And we have 2 fabulous folks on campus, Nicole Ardwin and Jennifer Wolf. I'm now colleagues of theirs because we've been co-authoring papers with students who are doing that kind of work. So I got my toe in the water, but not much, but I'm really looking forward to doing that more. And I want to, given all the resources you have, which look insane, I want to encourage you to do all the same, get out of your comfort zone, and take advantage of this incredible school that you attend. Thank you for inviting me.
I'd like to thank everyone for attending this session and invite you all to lunch in the Jaharis Cafe.